Welcome, everyone, and good evening. I would like to start by thanking all of the participants for being here with us, as well as the audience. This is the first in a series of meetings and discussions that the Sana Center will facilitate over the potential political settlement, and it will be live streamed on all of our social media platforms, including X, YouTube, and other social media platforms. This session aims to present the points of view of the various Yemeni political actors on the potential future political settlement, one that has been discussed for the past several months. And in this first session, we aim to provide a platform for the Yemeni parties to the conflict to discuss and present their perspectives on this political settlement. Today we'll have the following Yemeni parties. We have the General People's Congress, which was the ruling party until a very recent period, and the president of the Yemeni Presidential Leadership Council, Dr. Rashad Al-Alimi, is from this party, and he's represented by Abu Bakr al-Qirbi, an Assistant Secretary General for the GPC. We also have the Yemeni Socialist Party, which was the ruling party in southern Yemen before unification in 1990. He remains one of the most important Yemeni political parties, and it's represented by the party Secretary General, Abdurrahman al-Saqaf. We also have the Islah Party, formerly known as the Yemeni Congregation for Reform, one of the most important Yemeni opposition parties up until 2011, and was a partner in the government afterwards, and it is currently represented in the government. In this meeting, it is represented by the Deputy Secretary General of the party, Abdul Razzaq al-Hijri. We also have Abdullah Nu'man, representing the Nasserist unionist organization, the Nasserist Party in Yemen. He is the Secretary General of that party, one of an important political party. These three parties, the Nasserist, the Socialists, and the Islah, were an important opposition coalition up until the transitional period after 2011. I would like to welcome all of our speakers on this panel, and I would like to welcome all of our audience. We will start in our discussion on the settlement. There has been a lot of news reports on the negotiations between the Saudis and the Houthis, and the likeliness of a potential settlement. There have been leaks of a roadmap, one that is made up of 3 stages, and we would like to know more about what perspective the Yemeni parties have on the settlement. The Yemeni political parties, which were an important party to the GCC initiative agreement, an agreement that aimed to ensure a peaceful transfer of power after 2011, but now it seems like the Yemeni political parties are not included in this settlement. Welcome all. And so we will start with a question of whether there is an agreement that is going to be signed. Is there a settlement agreement in the coming period? And to how far have these negotiations progressed? And when might we expect to see an actual settlement being signed? There had been talk that there would be an agreement signed by the end of this month, but none of that has come to pass. We also heard rumors that there might be a signing of an agreement by the end of the year, but there's still no confirmed reports. I wanted to start by asking this question to Dr. Abu Bakr al-Qirbi. Abu Bakr, please go ahead. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today in this dialogue with a group of Yemeni political elites that I think can really help answer a lot of these questions. In response to your question, Mesa, the reports that we've heard recently about an agreement and that this agreement is ready to be signed, this is not the first time that we've heard this. We've heard this several times before. It has now been over a year where we've been we've heard constantly that this agreement is ready, it is going to be signed, and it keeps getting delayed a week and a month, but none of it has happened. There was a meeting in Riyadh. The members of the Presidential Leadership Council received a report summarizing the items of this agreement, and these were leaks that we cannot confirm, and that now they are preparing for a signing of the agreement. It was said that it would be signed on the 25th and then the 27th, but nothing has been confirmed as of yet. I believe that regardless of whether this occurs or not, or whether it is postponed, I think it will come to pass. I think an agreement will be signed, because us being here in this dialogue reiterates that we fully understand that the solution to the conflict in Yemen and to the Yemeni crisis is a political solution. There is no longer a military option on the table, but the problem is how we can reach this political solution and how we can work to ensure that it is not delayed. Because the more it is postponed and delayed, the less the less effective it is, and the less likely it is to take into account developments in the country, in the region, and in the world. I believe that there is definitely an agreement. There are ongoing negotiations. They were able to keep these negotiations and the progress of this process under wraps for a very long time, at least from my end. But I hope that the other speakers on this panel have more details about the progress of these negotiations. And I think the more important topic for us to discuss is how these political parties, these civilian political parties that want to contribute to a political solution, how they can push this political settlement forward, especially with the amount of suffering that we've seen reaching their pinnacle, not just for civilians, but even for us as politicians who have been dispersed all over the world. Thank you very much, Dr. Abu Bakr. And so what I understand from you is that this agreement will be signed definitely because the war has ended, and that your knowledge of the details of this agreement is still very limited. And so we will move on now to Abdurrahman As-Saqaf, the Secretary General of the Yemeni Socialist Party. In addition to that question, could you answer the question of whether there will be a signing of this agreement, in your point of view? Thank you very much, Mesa. I would like to start by saying good evening. As Abu Bakr al-Qirbi said, there hasn't been clear information about these negotiations and about the signing for this roadmap agreement. The roadmap that you mentioned that is made up of 3 stages. I think that this is due to the fact that all of the political parties did not participate in the discussions leading to this roadmap, that these discussions were limited to the members of the Presidential Leadership Council. The problem isn't in the signing of the agreement. I think there will be a signing, whether it's tomorrow or next week or even postponed past that. I think that the agreement will definitely be signed. But the question here is, what is the substance of this agreement? Will it be one that is suitable or acceptable for all Yemenis? And will it meet the aspirations that we have all had as Yemenis? I think that there have been several developments that have occurred throughout the period of the conflict, this conflict that has gone on for 9 years. And these developments have changed what this settlement might look like, and brought it further away from what Yemenis would want. And I think that there are 3 or 4 major transformations. First, there was the end to the Yemeni talks or negotiations directly after the end of the talks that took place in Kuwait. In 2017, there were also important developments all over the country. There were military withdrawals or an end to the military operations that were getting closer to Sana'a, and also the Houthi Affash or the Houthi Saleh coalition or alliance fell apart, leading to Ansar Allah taking control on the other side and no longer having to deal with an ally, and also the rise and emergence of new actors and forces in the south, specifically the Southern Transitional Council. And in 2017, a new UN Special Envoy was appointed after the Houthis pressured for the previous UN Special Envoy to be replaced. And a deputy for the UN Special Envoy was appointed, Mr. Ma'in Shiraim, and at that point, there was a latent conflict between the United Arab Emirates and the presidency of the Republic of Yemen. And in 2018, regional interventions in military and political affairs in Yemen increased. This led to the battles in Hodeidah being stopped and the Stockholm Agreement, which led to a very tangible shift in the balance of power serving the Houthis. And it is my personal opinion that this tried to demarcate the interests of the member states of the Arab coalition and other international actors at this time. The military forces of the Guardians of the Republic and the Southern Giants Brigade withdrew. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Abdurrahman. If you could please be as brief as possible in this question, because we also wanted to hear from the other speakers. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, I just wanted to focus on these specific points. In the period from 2019 until 2022, there were also important developments within the balance of power, within the legitimacy, within the internationally recognized government. And due to the weakness of political parties, I expect two things with regards to the settlement. First, I believe that this settlement will be based on the agreement that can be reached between the external actors, whether these are Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iran, the United Kingdom, or the United States. With the absence of Yemeni actors in the military and political balance of power, I think we will continue in this state of no peace and no war, with a trend towards reignited conflict in the future. When we come to the third stage of the proposed roadmap, and this stage is going to include negotiations over the form of the state, I think that this will lead to a new geopolitical map that was created in Yemen, that was created at that point in time, or in that period that I mentioned, where there were significant developments and shifts in the situation in Yemen. Thank you very much, Abdurrahman. We will now move on to Abdurrazzaq Al-Hijri. I'm sorry, you are the acting Secretary General of the ISL Party and not the Deputy Secretary General. Over to you. Sorry, what was the question, Mesa? It's the same question that we asked Abu Bakr and Abdurrahman. Do you think an agreement will be signed or not? We see now that there is consensus, that there seems to be consensus so far that an agreement will be signed, but we wanted to hear your perspective on it. Thank you very much, Mesa, and I would like to thank the Sana'a Center for the invitation and for this opportunity to discuss these important matters. And I would like to also thank the other panelists for being here. My dear colleagues, Abu Bakr and Abdurrahman, have already said that based on the information that we have, there has been significant progress made with regards to the settlement, and that it was very close to being signed. But we do not have details on when it will be signed and how that signing will take place, because it's still unclear. The mistakes that have been committed against the political parties in the previous period, and this is still continuing and must be stopped, is that the political parties and actors have been marginalized from this very important process. The negotiations have been limited to the members of the PLC, and this is positive in a sense, as the members of the PLC represent the leadership of the Yemeni state, but not including political parties is a big problem, because they are the political carriers for all of the previous stages, and this stage and any future settlement. Political parties play an important role as representatives. Political parties must not be excluded, because the Constitution of the Republic of Yemen is based on political pluralism, and so political parties must not be marginalized. For if parties were to be excluded, this will encourage other types of actors to fill that gap, and this is not in the interest of Yemen. We hope that the efforts by our brothers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and by Oman are successful in leading a political process, one that we all hope will lead to the state being restored and the coup of the Houthi militias being ended and state institutions resuming, and that we can continue with the process that we had started at the National Dialogue Conference. We had gotten to the point of a draft constitution, and there were preparations for this issue to be discussed at the General Authority for the implementation of the outcomes of the NDC. But unfortunately, this process was stopped with the Houthi coup. We hope that any political settlement will lead to a restoration of the state, an end to the coup, and not to legitimize the actions and behavior of militias as de facto authorities, so that they can continue with the war that they are waging against the Yemenis and their hindering of the political process. Our experience with the other side has been very bitter. For 9 years, the Houthis continued in their negotiations with the international community just over the issue of the FSO Safar. And so this is obviously a much larger issue, and we as political parties have always called and will continue to call for peace, an end to the coup, and an end to this war that was waged on Yemenis by the Houthis. Thank you very much. Thank you, Abdulrazak. Abdullah Nu'man from the Nasserist Party. What are your comments on this agreement? One that seems to be getting more and more likely as time goes on. If you could. Hello, good evening, everyone. We support any effort that aims to reach a peaceful and political settlement that leads to sustainable peace in Yemen, one that is based on a political process. I've heard a lot about this peace agreement that is going to be signed, but we don't know what this peace agreement will include. All that we've seen in the media is that there are ongoing negotiations between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Houthis, and I have not heard at any time that there were dialogues between the Houthis and the internationally recognized government. I've also not heard that there were any negotiations between the Saudis, who consider themselves mediators, and the leadership of the Yemeni state, because any mediator would need to conduct dialogue with both sides and not just one side, and I haven't heard of any actions of this sort. And so we do not know what this agreement will include. What are the references that this agreement is based on? This point is also unclear. We all want to ensure peace in Yemen and an end to the conflict. And this is the demand of all Yemenis, because they have been significantly affected by this war, a war that has destroyed the state, the infrastructure, and the livelihoods of Yemenis. We've heard about a roadmap that includes 3 stages. The first stage, there will be an agreement on the humanitarian and economic aspects, like the payment of salaries, release of prisoners, opening of roads, etc. And in the second stage of this roadmap, the first stage will end with the formation of a military committee, a political committee, and an economic committee. And we've also heard that this economic committee is active now and has actually been operationalized. I agree with what Abdurrahman has said about the developments and transformations that have occurred in the balance of power, but I doubt that this settlement, which is being done under wraps to this extent, with the exclusion of Yemeni society and Yemeni political parties, I doubt that it will reach a settlement, that this process will lead to a settlement that protects and preserves the rights and freedoms of Yemenis and ensures the participation of all. I think that if a settlement of this kind is reached, it will be one that responds only to regional interests, and Yemenis will not be represented in it. Will the Presidential Leadership Council take the risk of signing an agreement of this sort, an agreement that they have yet to see the details of? I honestly do not know. I think things have become much muddier. I think the differences within the internationally recognized government and within the National Alliance of political parties supporting the internationally recognized government have also led to significant changes and has weakened the internationally recognized government. On this basis, an agreement was reached for a truce agreement was reached based on during the period of the transfer of power, and this truce gave concessions and rights to the Houthis, and some of these concessions affected the legal status of the Yemeni state. And I fear that this will be further ingrained during these secret negotiations going on between the Saudis and the Houthis. Thank you very much. And so you are in agreement that there is an agreement, there are negotiations, and there is a roadmap. And there is no longer any doubt about that. And that all of these processes are being kept under wraps, and the Yemeni political parties are not included. And this is obviously a worrying development. And so my second question based on that is, if this agreement actually goes into effect, what would guarantee its success? I would like to start by asking this question to Abu Bakr al-Qirbi, because your party, the GPC, is still partially left in Sana'a and is still active in the parliament in Sana'a. The Houthis, after the killing of Saleh, no longer seem to care as much about partnership and power, and they are domineering and implementing their own political vision. Do you think that there is still any room during this first stage of the roadmap, one that aims to unify the Central Bank of Yemen and open roads and other such measures? Do you think that there are still room afterwards to move on to the second stage and to start talking about power sharing and partnership, like what happened after 2011? Thank you very much, Mesa. I think this is a very important question. But before I answer the question, I wanted to bring to comment on 2 points that some of my colleagues mentioned. First, I think that when we talk about the political settlement process, we need to talk about it with full belief in a political settlement being the only solution for Yemen. And I don't think we should go into it while being reluctant. A political settlement, a political solution is the only way forward. The second comment is how we as political parties, as civilian political parties, how can we ensure our position within or our status within these upcoming negotiations? If these negotiations take place bilaterally between the legitimacy and Ansar Allah, with the legitimacy being as divided as it is, then these negotiations, in answer to your question, will not be sustainable if that is the case, if political parties are not included. Another risk is that during this period, one where we are waiting for a solution and we're waiting to see how this agreement will be signed and when it will be signed, we might be surprised to find that Saudi Arabia finds itself in a difficult situation in trying to deal with this, and Saudi Arabia might decide to completely withdraw and leave us as Yemenis to continue fighting amongst ourselves. And this is our responsibility as political parties. How can we take these different scenarios and ensure that there is a clear voice by the political parties? Because obviously armed groups are in a completely different situation. And so when I say political parties, I mean the civilian political parties. We need to have a clear and unified front, because unfortunately there have been efforts to strengthen these armed groups at the expense of political parties at a time when there should have been more support for political parties, which would guarantee a future solution. In Yemen, things went the other way, and so today we need to think about how we can contribute to the political solution as political parties. And this political solution at the end of the day will not be decided by one side or a number of sides. This will need to be the result of consensus between the Yemeni actors. And it might fail, it might succeed, but we need to undertake this process. Thank you. This idea of negotiations, I believe, requires a balance of power. When you have one side that is armed and much more powerful, it is very clear that Saudi Arabia has decided to move on from the Yemeni file. And if it withdraws, what cards do Yemeni political parties and actors have to deal with the Houthis during these negotiations? What kind of parity can there be for negotiations to actually take place and to ensure power sharing? I think I agree with you. I think this is a real threat to us. But if it does occur, if it does come to that, I think it'll be a disaster if we haven't prepared ourselves for that. And this is the responsibility of Yemeni political parties to try to think of what ways or what avenues we have to deal with this. For us to wait until that happens, until we actually reach that disastrous situation, I think we all know what that will lead to. But I don't think we can go into details at this time in this meeting of what can be done, but I think there is a real need for the National Alliance of Political Parties supporting the legitimacy, an alliance that was founded during the time of Hadi. We need to establish a National Alliance of Political Parties to support Yemen, so that we can all work together and move past a lot of these terms that I keep hearing being repeated and are only furthering the divide. We need to work on regulating the media, the discourse and rhetoric used in the media, because these are the only ways that we continue. This is the only way that we can move past our vendettas and attempts to get revenge and deal with the greater threat that is a threat to all of us. I think what is Abu Bakr, what is the thing that you feel like is the biggest risk from your perspective? What is the biggest risk Yemen faces if this agreement is reached in a way that is not well thought out? There are several threats. First, we have the issue of external agendas, and there are several of them. We also have the problem of the political differences, which put the interests of political parties above the interests of Yemen. We also have the risk of the threat of the legitimacy, which is very fragile and has not been allowed to make decisions. These are the challenges that are making the situation more difficult and weakening the position of political parties. Why don't we let the others speak? Yeah, we will. But I had one last question for you. You mentioned that the political parties need to form an alliance. Has there been any discussion of an alliance between political parties of this sort? There have been discussions of an alliance of political parties, but it has not been translated into a real alliance or real first of all, we can't build an alliance over us having the single opponent. We need to form this alliance on the basis not of shared or mutual animosity towards a certain actor, but in trying to resolve the situation in Yemen. That we all believe that this can only be resolved through a political process, through a constitution, through the Republican system, and other guiding national principles that we all agree on. Thank you very much, Abu Bakr. If we could now move on to Abdullah Nu'man. You have reiterated many times that Saudi Arabia is presenting itself as a mediator, but it is behaving as a party to the conflict. And this is one of the biggest points of contention between the Houthis and the Saudis during these negotiations. But from your perspective, what do you think the role of Saudi Arabia will be after this agreement is reached? Obviously, Yemen and Saudi Arabia share a long border, and so it cannot fully withdraw. But what transformations could we see in the Saudi role in Yemen after this agreement is reached, and what impact would it have on the situation in Yemen? Thank you very much, Mesa. When I look into the situation and try to understand the various power centers that are involved in Yemen, it's clear to see that Saudi Arabia is involved in the conflict as a supporter of the legitimacy, and it is a primary party to the conflict. This was something, this attempt to present Saudi Arabia as a mediator was objected to by the Houthis when they said that Saudi Arabia cannot play the role of a mediator when it is the country leading the Arab coalition that intervened in Yemen to support the legitimacy. And so what changed and made the Houthis accept the role of Saudi Arabia as a mediator? I don't have any confirmed information on that, but I believe that now the situation is now the ball is in the court of the legitimacy and its leadership. There is no settlement can be agreed to unless the leadership of the internationally recognized government agrees to it. Meaning that this settlement, if we truly are independent in our decision-making process and can make, and here by this I mean the leadership of the internationally recognized government, this settlement cannot be accepted unless it is in the interests of the Yemenis, and these interests need to be represented by the internationally recognized government, even if this requires rejecting and refusing any pressure from outside. In that case, Saudi Arabia can sign an agreement with the Houthis, but this agreement will only be a non-aggression pact between the Saudis and the Houthis in an attempt to organize or secure the areas on the border and ensure that the Houthis will not carry out any attacks. Sorry, Abdullah, I just wanted to clarify one point. What we hear, this agreement that we're hearing about isn't going to be an agreement that Saudi Arabia is going to sign, but it is the one negotiating for it. The signatory to this agreement will be the internationally recognized government. Can the internationally recognized government not give in to the pressure by Saudi Arabia? Yeah, I know this, Mesa. That's what I was saying. If the agreement reached between the Saudis and the Houthis does not meet the interests of the Yemeni people, then our leadership should reject signing it. And in that case, there might be an agreement between the Saudis and the Houthis to stop the conflict between them. And at that point, Saudi Arabia might stop giving support to the leadership of the legitimacy. In that case, what options does the legitimacy have? They have two options. Either to try to rearrange and reorganize its own situation internally and to try to pursue a settlement on its own, or the Houthis will take over and expand and take control of all of Yemen. But the legitimacy must also prepare itself to deal with this attempt or this scenario, because I do not think that Yemenis will accept the Houthi project, no matter how long it takes. And full control might allow for new tools and instruments to resist this project in non-violent ways through civilian means. And this is what we should have done when the Houthis took control of the capital Sana'a. But unfortunately, Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi, the president, was not responsive at the time, and some of the political parties also were not responsive to this because they were afraid that the Houthis would start to use violence and that there would be significant losses. But now we've paid a price that no one had expected at the time with this war. I think that we need to be very careful and to focus on this issue. And Saudi Arabia must also recognize that any settlement that does not guarantee stability in Yemen and any settlement that does not ensure the reconstruction of Yemen, a sort of Marshall Plan for the reconstruction of Yemen, then Yemen will continue to be a fertile ground for terrorism, for drug smuggling. We all know that, and at the end of the day, this will go past Yemen's borders and will affect Yemen's neighbors, and the same for other organized crime groups. And there will not be stability and security in the region, and Saudi Arabia will continue to face problems if a war continues in Yemen or if a famine continues in Yemen. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think the options that we have as Yemenis is always to continue threatening, not threatening. It's not a threat to neighbors, but it's a reality of the situation. Yes, unfortunately. Abdurrahman Saqaf, what Abdullah proposed is that the legitimacy has two options. It has the option of not signing for an agreement if it is not included. And even if it does sign the agreement, it needs to work to rearrange itself internally. Do you think that this is possible? Do you think it is possible for the legitimacy to work to unify its ranks after 8 years of internal conflict within the anti-Houthi camp? Thank you very much, Mesa. Thank you for this question. In answer to this question, or to answer this question, we would need to think about it from different perspectives. It's not a question of whether the government can do, the legitimacy can do this or cannot do this. So the first point, if an agreement is signed, if this roadmap is signed, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia takes on the role of mediator between the various Yemeni parties, then this would mean that it has succeeded in making the Houthis negotiate with the legitimacy, because the Houthis have refused from the beginning to refuse with the legitimacy or to negotiate, have refused to negotiate with the legitimacy and have refused to negotiate with any other Yemeni actor because they believe that they're too powerful to do that and would need to negotiate directly with the region. And if that occurs, if the agreement is signed, this means that the Houthis have accepted to negotiate with the legitimacy, and I think this is an important point. Secondly, for Saudi Arabia to be a mediator, this does not mean that it will no longer have a role, or that it will withdraw or have a more isolationist or non-involvement policy when it comes to Yemen, because Yemen's national security and Saudi Arabia's national security have significant overlaps. And this means that neither side can just move on and withdraw and no longer be involved with the other. There was also another important point, the one that was mentioned by Dr. Abu Bakr al-Qurbi, when he said that there need to be alliances or coalitions or blocs among the Yemeni political parties, one that is broad and inclusive, and not just for political parties, but also includes civil society and includes social groups, and one that works for the salvation of Yemen, as he mentioned. And another important point is that this alliance can be based on a specific political platform and not be based on having mutual animosity, unless a certain party insists on being the opponent of all of the other actors. In that situation, the legitimacy then might be able to do something, but there is not much time left. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to Abdurrazak al-Hijri with regards to the possibility of political party alliances or the creation of these new alliances. Do you think that this is likely? Can the Islah Party, for example, one of the largest, maybe even the largest Yemeni political party when it comes to their popular support base, and a party that also has a lot of opponents within a lot of these emerging armed groups. Can the Islah become more open to the other political parties? Are there ongoing discussions, closed discussions between the Islah and the other parties to form alliances such as this? Thank you, Mesa. I think when it comes to expanding these alliances and trying to unify or to unify internally, I think this is very important. Whether in this stage, in an attempt to restore the state, or even afterwards, when we try to rebuild after a settlement is reached. We already have an experience in this. We have the National Alliance of Political Parties supporting the legitimacy. It includes all of the major political parties. It was announced in April 2019, and this alliance is still operating. We in the National Alliance of Political Parties have agreed that we were open to all of the other groups and actors supportive of the legitimacy, including the STC, the Political Bureau of the National Resistance, and others like the Hadramaut Inclusive Conference or any other Southern actors like the Southern National Coalition or the components of the Southern Movement. There is communication by us in the National Alliance, and we and other political parties have adopted the position of the importance of expanding this alliance. Our colleagues in the Socialist Party, the Nasserist, and us as well in this law have called for this. The head of the Supreme Commission of the Islah Party, the head of that commission, asked for an expansion of the National Alliance to include the STC, the Political Bureau of the National Resistance, and others. And this is a very clear position by the Islah Party. We believe in expanding this alliance because we believe that the only way out for Yemen is through consensus and agreement, and even after the settlement is reached. And if there is an end to the war, and like Abdullah said, we work towards the interests of Yemen, even then we will need this sort of alliance and this kind of partnership in administering the coming period. There is no one could govern on their own. No one could work for the salvation of Yemen on their own, regardless of whether they believe they are able to or not. We believe it's important to have broad national partnerships. Within the National Alliance of Political Parties, we continue to work on coordinating and communicating. Even with regards to the political process, we've had a unified vision, and we submitted it to the members and president of the PLC. And we were all in agreement as political parties that it's important for there to be a Yemeni dialogue, the importance of including the political parties, and that the peace must be based on clear references and one that is sustainable and that maintains the legal status of the state, with arms only being under the control of the state, etc. And we in the Islah are also in contact with our brothers in the STC. We're also in contact with the Political Bureau of the National Resistance and other components, because at the end of the day, we are all Yemenis. We are all in this together, and we need to work together. We are also in contact with the various groups with the GPC, with the various groups within it. And I think we all have the same objective, which is restoring the state and ensuring a recovery in the country. We need to all work together to rebuild the country. And like Abdurrahman said, and like Abu Bakr said, this alliance could include all political parties with the objective of rebuilding the state, except if any of these actors do not want to be included, that is their choice. But we remain open and we extend our hands to any other political party who will be involved. We've said that there's room in Yemen for all of us, and that we need to try to overcome what happened to it after the coup and the war. Thank you very much, Abdulrazak. There was an important question when you spoke about the Southern Transitional Council and the national resistance. When it comes to your relationship with the UAE, when we talk about the regional situation, there's a lot of concern about the conflicting interests of regional actors in Yemen. And this point was mentioned several times. And so, with regards to the relationship of the Islah and the UAE, as everyone knows, I think this is a negative relationship. The UAE has a problem with the Muslim Brotherhood throughout the region. And so, do you see a possibility of a convergence or rapprochement with the STC, despite the fact that they are a proxy or an ally of the UAE in Yemen? First, with regards to this position of the stance of the UAE towards what they call political Islam, this has nothing to do with us in the Islah because we have a very clear position. We said that we have nothing to do with the international Muslim Brotherhood movement. We have tried several times to restore relations with our brothers in the UAE, and we've had meetings. I think you all know that there were meetings between Islah leaders and Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed under with the support of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and they visited them in the UAE. And I've said this several times, and I will say this again today, that for us in the Islah, at least from our end, we have absolutely no problem with our brothers in the UAE. They were very important partners and members of the coalition, and they've done a lot to fight against the Houthi project. They've had even sacrifices among their own forces, their own sons, to achieve this. We do not want to cause any problem for our country under the justification of an attempt to fight against Islam. So we are trying to avoid that. With regards to the STC, we continue to be in contact with them, whether with regards to the National Alliance of Political Parties. Just a few days ago, we had a meeting in Amman in Jordan with them. Abdurrahman and Abdullah were with us, and we met with them, met with the STC to try to come up with or to reach a unified vision for any future political process. There is also contact between us on an individual basis, between us and leadership in the STC, because like I said, we're all in this together, and we're all facing an opponent who is targeting all of us. And the Houthis do not differentiate between the GPC or the Nasrists or the STC or the Islah. The Houthis believe that they can rule on their own, and we need to deal with it. I think that we can overcome these difficulties, and I think that there is enough common ground for us to stand on and to reach a solution that will be acceptable to us and our brothers in the STC. Thank you very much, Abdulrazak. I wanted to also take this question on the regional situation and regional interventions in Yemen. Yemen has become more and more open to regional interventions. And so my question is to Abu Bakr al-Qirbi with regards to the most recent tensions between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. We've heard a lot about tensions or competition between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. In your perspective, to what extent can this hinder the success of a settlement or lead to tensions, especially in the areas not under the control of the Houthis? Thank you, Mesa. First, I think that there are several problems within the region, within the coalition itself. Even there are differences. Some of them are very clear to see, like the differences between the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and some of them are not as clearly displayed. And so we should not limit our thinking about our crisis with the region to the Saudi Emirati tensions or disputes. Secondly, with regards to the region, unfortunately, many who speak about the region and the Yemeni crisis, they say that some of the political parties and most of the armed groups in Yemen are directly linked to one state, one regional actor or the other. And so this has led to a real problem in Yemen, because any political process that does not have the support of all of the regional actors involved in the conflict in Yemen and all of these proxy battles will lead to these regional actors hindering this political process. These countries must be held directly responsible. We've always reiterated that the solution must be a Yemeni solution, but it cannot be a Yemeni solution in reality when there are regional actors that can influence and affect one side or the other. And so bringing this decision-making back to Yemenis should be one of our most important objectives, and this cannot be achieved unless these regional actors who are intervening in Yemen, and this is something that the UN Special Envoy and other international actors who want peace in Yemen need to think about. These countries must face this responsibility. They need to be asked, do you truly want stability in Yemen for the Yemeni crisis to end or not? If the answer is yes, then I think the path forward will be easy. All they will need to do is to bring the Yemenis together to negotiate and not hinder that process. But if they will continue in intervening and trying to affect the negotiations ongoing between Yemenis, then this will lead to that process failing. Unfortunately, this is something that is not being discussed enough. And another important point, especially with regards to the countries of the Gulf, we have the GCC initiative that were signed by all of the parties here in this session today. And this GCC initiative is what gave Hadi the legitimacy. He was not elected as president. What gave him legitimacy were the political parties and the fact that they agreed to him becoming president. And this is why there were no other candidates in that election. And so these political parties, which signed the GCC initiative and its implementing regulations, have forgotten that they have an important role that they must insist on in the political process and in any political settlement. We need to remember this now. That if we want to think about what role the political parties can play in this, because these political parties are civilian and actors, and the situation in Yemen has been militarized. The question is, to what extent can you pressure the regional actors to ensure the inclusion of political parties in the political process? I think this will require political action. If political parties work and take political action with these influential regional actors, and we hear the voice of Yemeni media and of the Yemeni public in support of this. Unfortunately, one of the problems we face now is the media. The media has had a very negative role in defending the need for peace in Yemen and demanding an end to interference in internal issues in Yemen. The media, just like some of the political actors, has come under the control of these regional actors or external actors. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to Abdurrahman Saqaf. When it comes to the south, the regional disputes or the regional differences in Hadramaut in the south are very clear, with the tensions between the Saudis and the Emiratis. There is also Al Mahra, where there is Emirati influence and competition between the Saudis and the Omanis. And so the South has become a battleground for regional actors. Can the South be protected from these regional tensions? Is there a way to do that? Well, the first thing, whether it is the southern issue or the political situation in general, this is definitely going to be influenced by the competition within the region. This is something that we need to take into account, because in Hadramaut or Al Mahra and the presence of regional actors, this is something that has become a reality, their presence on the ground in these areas. Any competition that is not regulated, that is not limited, that is not linked to objectives that take into account national security in Yemen, will only lead to chaos and will not lead to positive developments for anyone. And this is where I agree with Abdullah Al-Nu'man, that the strategic location of Yemen is a double-edged sword. It could lead to peace and stability and economic prosperity, but it can also lead to chaos. And so any chaos in Yemen, for any reason, will not be justified and will lead to repercussions beyond Yemen's borders. With regards to the southern issue, where the issue of the southern people has become one that is reiterated politically and has become one that is recognized by the political and military actors. And when this issue, the southern issue, becomes better understood by the political parties, whether individually or collectively, when it is positively addressed, then the southern issue will be an important entry point for peace in the region as a whole. But we also need to take into account that it is very difficult today to exclude the STC because it represents an important political and military force in the south, and the things that are happening in Hadramaut or happening in Al-Mahra or any other attempts to form other political actors to try to confront the STC. I don't think these attempts will be successful, these attempts to confront the STC through the formation of other political and military actors in the south. Dealing with the STC as just a proxy of the UAE, or it's true that the UAE supports the STC more than it supports other actors in Yemen, and I think that is normal, that any actor in Yemen will try to find support. But what we are talking about now is that it is very difficult to move past the STC, especially with its political influence and weight on the ground and popular support and military power. The STC has also been able to prove its ability to counter terrorism and its counterterrorism operations. And the STC has been able to control all of these areas without any stronghold separating it. I think that it is important to rethink how the STC is dealt with, not as an opponent, but as an important part of the balance of power within the political sphere in Yemen. But would this be possible, however? I mean to say that the STC now is a part of the government, is a part of the Presidential Leadership Council, but the STC is also demanding an independent state, which is in contradiction with the references that the Yemeni state is based on. And it also contradicts the principles or the references of political activities in Yemen. And so, to what extent can there be agreement if that is the case? In addition to that, this could be a problem in all of the political parties or political actors, and not just in the STC. But it is the fact that it is part of the opposition and also part of the regime, that they are playing the role of opposition and criticizing the authorities that they are a part of. But going back to the problem of the references, this is the problem that needs to be addressed. To what extent can there be an agreement or an understanding with the STC when the references are completely different? As I've understood, and like as we've discussed within the National Alliance of Political Parties during our dialogue with the STC, in order to revive our partnership, we've found that there were changes to their political visions due to them actually becoming more and more involved in politics, and them moving past the populist attempts at politics. And so now you can be seen as a part of a revolutionary movement, but as a part of a peaceful activism and as a part of the state. I participated there was an interview in Chatham House with the president of the STC, Aidarus Zubaydi, and he said that there were three potential scenarios that there would be they could remain as a part of a federal state, or a return to the old state, the former state in the south. And the third option was a single state in Yemen, but that this would require a referendum. He is no longer demanding only secession, and I think that this requires the political parties to continue with their dialogue, to continue getting closer and closer to the SDC, because their involvement in politics on the ground, and when they bear these responsibilities, I think they need to take other considerations into account other than the considerations that they might have had when they were still an emerging actor in the south. And another thing that was mentioned, one time there was a non-Yemeni who was speaking to us about the media in Yemen. He was saying that this media is not a media for the people. It's a media that tries to create narratives. It's a media that, and I think the Western media has also proven that they are also a media of narratives and not a media of facts. And we've seen this in recent developments. There's I think in the media in general there's no objectivity, and I think unfortunately everyone is dealing with it in the same way. Thank you very much, Abdullah. Thank you very much, Abdurrahman. We'll now hear from Abdullah. Now, with the ongoing war in Gaza and the escalating tensions in the region, and the Houthis being part of the so-called axis of resistance led by Iran, do you think that these regional developments might hinder any agreement being reached in Yemen? Do you think that they might lead to escalation between the Iranian axis and Arab states, primarily Saudi Arabia? Do you think that this might lead to the failure of this agreement? Is that likely? You haven't unmuted yourself. Thank you very much. If you'll allow me, before answering that question, I had a few quick comments on the issue of alliances and the future. With regards to the importance of creating an alliance to end this crisis and to ensure a just and sustainable peace in Yemen, I think this is possible, but there are conditions. First, we've had several experiences when it comes to alliances, and we need to go back and evaluate and assess them and find out where we failed. We had the joint meeting parties, the JMP, after which we had the youth revolution and the signing of the GCC initiative and its implementing regulations. And the GCC initiative had a real project for a transition in power that would meet the aspirations of the Yemeni people. But why did we fail then? We failed because we view these alliances as a tool for us to achieve our own political interests and individual interests without taking into account the broader interests. We saw that this was an opportunity for the removal of Ali Abdullah Saleh and to take over the state. We also have another experience, which is the National Alliance of Political Parties. We had a program that was excellent to reform the legitimacy, but it's because those who were in power or were close to power hindered the implementation of this program that they themselves had signed or agreed to within the alliance. Today we have an authority and we have certain partners within the PLC, and we and them. It wasn't. They weren't appointed as representatives of the parties. But how can I say that we are marginalized or not included when we have someone who is included in the PLC who is affiliated with our party? Either this person is not involved and we need to say that they're not affiliated with us, or they would need to come to us and give us all the details of what is going on in the operations of the PLC itself, or in the talks between the PLC and Saudi Arabia. Secondly, this PLC represented the alliance of armed groups of de facto authorities. Allow me to use a term that I've used before. I think the PLC has failed in becoming an umbrella that all of these different projects and all of these different political actors can come under. And the PLC has failed in setting very clear priorities that everyone can agree to, and that would lead us to our primary objective, which is the restoration of the state, without solely focusing on these individual or party projects, which can only be achieved after the state is restored. And so the actors involved in the PLC, rather than them coming together to create a better negotiating position for the legitimacy, they have become a further dilemma. The National Alliance did not put in any effort to try to bridge these gaps or to agree on priorities, and they also have not tried to achieve that. And we and the political parties have been unable to play a role in this. And so I believe that alliances, whether within the legitimacy or outside of it, will only succeed if all of the members can move past their narrow political interests and focus on the public or the broader good. But, sorry. Okay. I'll just let me just finish this point. I think that I don't think we should try to. We don't want to show everyone that we're all in agreement and things are great. That's not true. There are sharp divisions within the legitimacy, and if we cannot overcome them, we will not be able to build an alliance with the actors or the groups within the area in the areas under the control of the Houthis. Sorry, my question is the problem with these alliances. You've said that there are narrow interests at play and there are regional dimensions. Oh yes, exactly. And the regional dimension is also an important factor in furthering these divisions. The biggest mistake that was made is that the members of the Arab coalition have created direct relations or communication with political parties or armed groups on the ground whose loyalty they have bought through financial and military support. And unfortunately, these relations were legitimized. What should have happened is that the relationship between regional actors should go through the state, relationship between states, and any work by internal political parties should go through the state. And a statement that we released in the Nasr's organization in June 2015, we said that there are 3 conditions for success. The first is to unify the resistance, to ensure that it is under Yemeni command and control, and that the government is the only way for support to be provided to the resistance. Unfortunately, this was not implemented, but I think we can still overcome it if there is sufficient will. With regards to working with the SDC, I don't think we can create an alliance that will help bring about just and sustainable peace in Yemen unless we are able to overcome the divisions within the legitimacy. And this requires that we reach an agreement for the resolution of the southern issue. We cannot all go into negotiations to represent the legitimacy unless we agree on how the southern issue can be resolved, or how what our brothers in the STC call the issue of the southern people, or the cause of the southern people. First, we need to understand we all need to understand that we cannot have secession and self-determination unless the state is restored. The second point is we need to take into account what measures can we take to reassure our brothers in the STC that if there is a settlement that is reached, that it will not be violated. And I think this is within the right. There have been many agreements that have been signed in Yemen that were later violated. Another important point is after we try to work on bridging these divides and we unify the legitimacy, how can we have clear priorities that are not in the interests of that don't strive to achieve the narrow interests but the broader interests and consensus? And how can we ensure that these alliances will include all of the actors in the areas under the control of the Houthis, whether they are political parties or civil society organizations or social groups? With regards to the coming period, I think that the situation in Gaza and the war, it has had a direct impact on the Yemeni crisis. I also believe that this attempt to speed up the signing of the agreement is a result of the developments and dynamics in the region. And the objective of trying to speed up this agreement is to try to ensure that the war does not expand and does not become a regional war. This is obviously what the concern of the United States is, and what of the Iranians and others. And this is and so this agreement would try to ensure Saudi Arabia's security and ensures Iran's neutrality. I have my own perspective, however, on this. In this situation, when we see this animosity and hostility between Iran and the United States, there are still negotiations between Iran and the United States where they will release $10 billion of funds that were confiscated in Iraq, and this is during the war. The president of Iran attended the Arab and Islamic Summit in Riyadh, and one of the decisions made during the summit was to resolve the Palestinian issue based on a two-state solution. This is very close to the Arab initiative, whereas Iran's belief was that we need to remove the Zionist entity, and I agree with that. The use of the Houthis now is a temporary usage. And in all honesty, despite all of the internal contradictions, I agree. I support every missile and every rocket that really targets the Zionists and targets the Americans there. And I believe that regardless of this propaganda and all of this media rhetoric, their missiles, rather than being fired at Eilat, I think that's way too far for them. I think what they must do is they must strike the Dahla base of the Zionist entity, which is close to Yemen, and also to target the American ships in the Red Sea, and to strike the American bases in Saudi Arabia and Qatar and in Bahrain. And this way, we'll support them and we'll believe that they're actually doing that. We'll... Thank you very much, Abdullah Na'man. We'll now move on to Abdurrazzaq Al-Hijri. With regards to the military escalation in Marib and Marib, every time there are tensions, Marib is usually a hotspot of these tensions. And there was also talk at the time when there were escalating tensions. There was also talk of initiative for Ta'z, and there had been discussions between Islah and the Houthis. Marib is still under threat from the Houthis from time to time. And so where does the Islah see itself in this coming period? Has the Islah, for example, tried to open channels for communication between itself and the Houthis? If you could unmute yourself when answering the question, Abdurrazzaq. The Islah sees itself as being part and parcel of the national political process, and we said that, and self-determination or determining the future of the country. It's not something that anyone can make their decisions on unilaterally. There are institutions, and not even the Islah could do this. There are state institutions. There are also other political parties, and I think these decisions could be made on that. With regards to what the Houthis are doing in Marib, the Houthi assault in Marib has not stopped, and not just Marib but also Ta'z, and this is part of the Houthi approach, where they believe that they can impose their beliefs and ideology by force of arms. We hope that the Saudi efforts with the Houthis will lead to actual implementation on the ground, and that the Houthis will truly show that they are with, or they want to reach peace. But unfortunately, the violations that we see on the ground do not show this, or do not prove that point. At the end of the day, Yemenis will not accept to be ruled by the force of arms, no matter how long it will take. And I think that the Houthis could help us in avoiding that. What about Ta'z and Mashat's initiative? I've only heard about it in the media. It is a part of the Houthis' propaganda, and I think at the time the governor of Ta'z, Nabil Shamsan, responded to this initiative, and he's the individual representing the governorate. And these were just some media reports, and maybe in preparation of upcoming assaults. But any negotiations with the Houthis We believe that it must go through the legitimacy, not the Islah and the Houthis. We do not take our own individual positions on these national level issues. We are part of the legitimacy, and negotiations must go through the legitimacy through its formal state institutions if we are ever to reach a just and sustainable peace that achieves stability in Yemen, normalizes the situation, and helps end the bloodshed in the country. Thank you very much. This is going to be the final topic. Unfortunately, we're nearing the end of our session with only 10 minutes remaining. I wanted to ask you, as representatives of the political parties, these political parties were an important part of the political process in Yemen, and the political parties have lost a lot during the war. Have the parties tried to assess or evaluate what has happened in the past and the responsibility for what has happened in Yemen? That the parties bear the responsibility for what has occurred in Yemen during the transitional period and after it, because a war erupted in Yemen only after the failure of the transitional process. And so, has there been any form of internal assessment and review? We'll start with you, Abdulrazak, because you represent the party with the largest popular support base. I think obviously mistakes will be made. No one is perfect, but the work that we have done, whether together or as individual parties, there have been many mistakes that were made. And I think that this is the responsibility of the political sphere as a whole, and based on the mistakes that each individual party made. With regards to, for example, the collapse of the state in 2014, this was due to the problems within the relationship between political parties. Like Abdullah said, after 2011, each political party worked only for their own narrow party interests, and the divisions that we saw between the political parties, with the GPC on one side and the other political parties on the other side, they played an important role in the collapse of the state. The Houthis benefited from these differences and disputes. I've said in a previous interview that the Houthis have been able to benefit from these differences and divides, and they would tell every one of the political parties and actors that they only would target one or a single party, whereas they came for all of us. I think we in the political parties need to carry out a real assessment with full responsibility of the mistakes that we've committed. And I think that this would need to be an internal assessment and evaluation first and foremost. And we would need to stop with us blaming the outside world for all of our problems. We always hold them responsible. But there are mistakes that were committed that we as political parties have been responsible for, and we need real change and a real assessment of our role, of our programs, of the figures. And these problems only happened after the mistakes that were made in the political system, and we are part of that. There's always a question that we see here, however. The parties now have lost their ability to recruit, and there's always and there is and there are significant divisions, whereas the first tier leaders of the political parties are outside Yemen. And so my question to you is, does the Islah Party intend to make changes within the leadership? We had heard that there might be changes in leadership within the party. And so how true is that? And secondly, can the Islah better utilize social media, for example, to better communicate with its grassroots and its constituents, especially with the differences that we see now? What with the destruction of political life after the coup, this has affected the political parties, and this includes the Islah. Its leaders had to leave Yemen and are now all over the world, and this has also closed the room. There's also the political activities have been stopped in the areas of the Houthis, and the situation in the areas under the control of the government is not much better off. In the Islah, the leadership has remained the same. I'm not here to defend it or to find a justification. We were working on conducting a general assembly for the Islah in 2012, but unfortunately, with the developments, everything was delayed, and it would be difficult to hold a general assembly for a party in these very difficult conditions. But we've tried over the past, we've been working over the past few months to make changes to the Islah leadership at the governorate level. There were elections for new leadership. And this is something that is currently being discussed within the Islah to try to find suitable conditions for these changes, because this is a normal part of any political party or of life in general, that there needs to be change and there needs to be a passing of the torch because of the difficult situation that we are in. But obviously, people have, we need change in the coming period. And you said about benefiting from previous experiences. It's true. We've also been trying to benefit from newly available tools for this communication, because social media has allowed for a lot of a huge flow of information or expression at all different levels. I think people have become more open, but it has also led to people not adhering to the general directives of the party. But we're working to try to arrange the situation in a way that achieves at least the bare minimum of change and better coordination. And we hope that these changes can occur soon when we have a suitable opportunity for this to be done properly and soundly. Thank you very much. Now over to Abu Bakr al-Qirbi with regards to the GPC. The GPC is a party that has always been accused of being a party that was only would only remain if it was in power. But even after Saleh left power, the GPC continued. Usually, parties in power in the Arab world would disappear after losing power, but the GPC continues to have a direct link to its grassroots. But there are also significant divisions, internal divisions within the GPC. Has the GPC worked to try to rethink or review or assess this experience, and to have there been any efforts to try to reunify the party internally? Abu Bakr, if you could unmute yourself. All of the political parties are face these same divisions. So, for example, we have the Nasrists. There are Nasrists in Sana'a. There are some of our brothers in the Islah also who are who have been divided. I think this is the effect of geography of where these people are. So the people in Saudi Arabia, for example, they have their own perspective. Those in the UAE have their own perspective, and those inside Yemen have their own perspective. And the GPC, what we reiterate is that the GPC and the leadership of the GPC in Sana'a are the representatives of the GPC, and this is the perspective of most of the members of the GPC, even outside of Sana'a. And I think you might have seen that on several occasions, President Hadi would try to, or others would try to tell him that he should be the head of the GPC, but he was not successful in becoming the head of the GPC, and he didn't succeed not because of those who were inside Yemen, but because of those who were outside of Yemen, members of the GPC outside of Yemen. And this shows a clear link between us abroad and those inside Yemen. And these divisions that might be seen, there are differences because some people might believe in a military solution, whereas others might believe in a peaceful political solution. And this is one of the strengths of the GPC. We're not forced to have a single opinion that people will only follow one perspective or the other. This is why the GPC continues to be popular, not just because of these commitments, but also because of all of the experiences that came after the GPC have failed. But I think when we base our usefulness on others' failure, I don't think it's a useful. No, not just on others, but I've sat with many of the young youth who were part of the revolution, and they say that we regret what we said. And there were also politicians. We don't want you to be proud or prideful in your sins. But you asked me this question. I didn't ask it. You asked how the GPC has maintained its popularity. Because the alternative was not suitable for the Yemeni people. There wasn't, and people did not end up leaving the GPC. To the contrary, now many people have been joining the GPC, but this isn't the issue here today. The issue is how the GPC has been, alongside the other political parties, how do they view our shared future, the future of Yemen, not the future of Yemen, of a Nasrist Yemen or an Islahi Yemen or a GPC Yemen. It's Yemen for all of us. The differences that we might have within these alliances is the question is why would we want this alliance? And this is something we need to think about carefully. Well, the question here is has the GPC been able to overcome its problems in 2011? Its problem with the rest of the political parties? Maybe with some political parties, no, it hasn't. And so you said that my dear Mesa, when you hear speakers in interviews like this, they try to use they try to focus on saying things that, to appease their popular support base who were not happy with that regime. Because if they say that this regime had been better, then they think this would be a crime. But the crime is for you to not recognize and confess that you made a mistake. We must overcome all of this. We must move past. We must move on from the past and think about the future. If we truly want, no one could say that they didn't contribute to the problem. If we start from 1962 and the September Revolution or the October Revolution in the South, there have been many successive mistakes and wasted opportunities. Can we stop them now? That's what we need to think about now, how we can stop this now. Thank you very much, Abdul Abu Bakr. Abdurrahman Saqaf, we also had a question, and I wanted to end this our dialogue with this question to you and to Abdullah Nu'man with regards to the political parties inside Yemen. Or sorry, internally. The Socialist Party, I think, had its own internal review after 1986, but has the Socialist Party tried to rearrange its affairs? The Socialist Party always had the burden that it was representative of the South, and now it seems like the STC has taken that away from the Socialist Party, and the Socialist Party is not in its best conditions now. Well, based on just to comment on what Bakr al-Qirbi, when he spoke about the parties, he mentioned only the parties that were established in the north, and he didn't mention the Socialist Party. But regardless, we are part. We as a Socialist Party are part and parcel. No. I didn't mention you, but you're always in my heart, Abdurrahman. I don't think he meant. I'm not saying he meant to do that, but we are part and parcel of the Yemeni political process, and we in that context we have a moral and a political responsibility to the southern issue, and that's something that we will never move past, and that's something that we believe is important to understand. The party conference for the Socialist Party was held in December 2014, and so in the midst of the conflict that was going on at the time, and going back to the documents that we have at the time, you will find in the party literature, you'll find that everything that we predicted has actually occurred, and that the events that occurred have proven that. And you can go back to all of the party literature. So, for example, an important thing that we had asked for guarantees for the implementation of the outcomes of the NDC, but unfortunately they were overcome. I'm sorry, Abdul, I just had an important question, and it's not just the idea of theory. This is a political party that needs to take political action, and not just the idea of theoretically understanding politics. The party has its popular support base or its grassroots. What is your ability to keep all of this in line, or to bring them all together? I think you still can operate in different places in Yemen. Focusing on the theories, I think it's a focus on the knowledge perspective. Yes, but that's our role at the Sana'a Center. As political parties, you should be decision makers. But there are people who practice politics based on their own personal interests, and not based on this knowledge of politics. We're now trying to revive the internal situation. I think if you followed the news, you'll see that our party institutions are becoming more and more active, and are very active in most governorates. The constituents or the members of the party are involved in a lot of workshops carried out by international organizations and others, and we also have a political presence with all of the different alliances that we are involved in, like the National Alliance of Political Parties, because we reiterate the importance or the point that a single political party cannot do anything on their own, especially with these difficult situations. I read one time, you wrote something that I really liked, and I always use that: when the state disappears, politics disappears, and that when the state comes back, the political process will come back. And we, at the end of the day, are political parties. And no, but your task is to restore the state, or who else will restore the state? Yes, of course. We're working on operation or activating our relationship with the various unions and civil society and grassroots organizations, and this is something that will obviously take time, in addition to what and Abdul Razak mentioned this, our participation in establishing a broad and inclusive alliance. The party members participate in different discussions, but the problem is that we have a problem in the media apparatus, and this is something that requires a lot of funds, and these funds are not available internally. We don't want to ask any external actor for support in doing this, and we reassure everyone that the Socialist Party will continue to play this role, its important political role, alongside all of the other political parties. Thank you very much. We're 7 minutes over time, but Abdullah will try to be as brief as possible. I had the same question to you. We believe in the importance of political parties, and if they disappear, all that we'll have left are the narrower geographic, tribal, and ideological identities that are not representative. And now many of the public has moved towards all of these different geographic identity-based movements, like the Aqiyal or the Southern Movement or others. I asked you the same question that others have asked. Has there been assessment by the Nasserist party of the role, and is there an attempt to further develop this party? Thank you very much. With regards to us in the Nasserists, we have conducted an assessment of our performance before the General Annual Assembly in July 2014, and the outcomes and the concluding statement reflected this assessment that was conducted. We also in several interviews with the media have also mentioned have publicly criticized the failures of our own party and have said that we were working on reassessing some of these positions and overcoming these mistakes, and we're still carrying out this assessment. This assessment continues. But the problem is also like Abdul Hassan said, is in the media. We do not have influential media platforms and outlets, and there are also some things in the review or the assessment that cannot be publicized. There's no doubt that the war and the ongoing developments and also the difficult conditions in the country have affected the ability of political parties to operate. But we do not have any divisions. Our leadership remains unified in Sana'a and Aden and everywhere else. And what Dr. Abu Bakr al-Qirbi said was not totally accurate. It's true that we have leaders in Sana'a and in other areas, but there was no position that they took that were against the announced positions and stances of the political party. And we continue to meet, to communicate with them, and at times we even meet. Where I think we might be the only party where we had the General Secretariat meeting and issued a statement from it in October. And so I don't think it's proper to make these kinds of judgments that are not based on fact or reality. And he also mentioned and saying that the previous regime was better. That is there are no regimes that are that are 100% good or 100% bad. And the regime that came after the regime of former President Ali Abdullah Saleh, if they had failed to achieve many of the things that should have been achieved during that period, but this does not, their failure does not mean that the previous regime was better. But regardless, we hope that the coming period will be one where there is more political activities. And it's true that we face difficulties in communication. So, for example, whenever we are active in the areas under the control of the legitimacy, our activities are in line with what the conditions imposed or the authority in the areas of the Houthis. Because of the extreme repression there are other forms of activities that we undertake there. But the deteriorating living conditions have affected the presence or the influence of political parties, and that is something we must recognize. Thank you very much. The questions from the audience were very closely linked to a lot of the issues that we discussed, like what are the alternatives if the settlement fails, if there is the likely or possible alliance, also about the regional dimension. And so these are all issues that we've discussed, the challenges of the political settlement, and also the idea of marginalization. I thank the audience for their questions. A lot of these questions were covered, but one question remains, and it was a question asked by the audience that I wanted to ask to all of you. It's with regards to women. Where are women in all of this? And so expanding the popular support base requires the inclusion of women. There are also it's very clear that youth are not as interested in political parties. 4 of you are men, and we always see that the first tier of leadership of political parties is always made up of men. And so my question, and women have always complained that their political parties always marginalize them, and political parties should, as civil entities, should be more supportive of that. Abdullah, we'll start with you. Thank you. We try as much as possible to provide the guarantees for broader participation for women in the party. Our assistant secretary general is a woman, and also Lubna al-Qadasi is a member of the general secretariat, and we also have female political leaders in all of the branches of the party. In our central assembly, we have 28 out of the 100 representatives are women. I'm not saying that this is sufficient participation, but this is what we were able to achieve, and we hope that this participation is expanded in the future. The participation of women in political activity is also linked to the desire to do so, or the ability of women and their preparedness to participate, and also the persistence to continue with this work. Thank you. Thank you very much, Abu Bakr, with regards to youth and women and their inclusion in political parties. Sorry, we can't hear you. I think you're still muted. In the General People's Congress, there have been 3 assistant secretaries general, Faiq Said, Fatima Al-Khatari, and at all levels of the GPC, the women are present. But I also agree with you that there needs to be special focus on empowering women in the political in political activities, because I think that the solution for what Yemen is going through might or is likely to come from Yemen. Abdurrazzaq, the Islah has always been viewed as a conservative party, but the Islahi women have played a very important role, especially in 2011. At the end of the day, we're a result of our environment, but you're always accused of using women for the gain of the party. That's always the state of the Islah, that they're always demonized and accused of everything. We've gotten used to it, and it's become a part of everything else that we bear. But women do have a presence. We hope that in the coming period, with the restructuring or the development in our literature and in our internal regulations and bylaws, as well as the renewal of the Islah Party, that we will improve the situation, that there will be high level leadership positions in addition to the women's department, where women will be there. Women have an important role at the government level in the activities that we have, also in their participation. Women from the Islah have been excellent and have participated in a lot of these meetings and activities, but it's not at the level of our aspirations, and we hope that the situation improves. And unfortunately, this is not a problem, not just at the Islah. We in the legitimacy, all of us, the government, for the first time in several years, there is not a single woman in the cabinet. And I think that this is a mistake that we all committed, and we hope that we can avoid it in any coming arrangements by the political system as a whole. And we hope that we can also see new leadership for the Islah Party sometime soon. Thank you very much, Abdurrahman Saqaf. Our position towards women at the Socialist Party is known. I think we've had a very clear ideological position in the 5th General Congress. It was the title of that Congress was a positive bias towards women, or positive support of women, and that women, there was a quota of 30% for women in all of the leadership departments, but unfortunately due to the war this was not done. We now have Johara Hamoud, who's a former minister in Basindua's government, who is now representative of the party, and she's the Assistant Secretary General of the party, and she's also working to supervise the General Secretariat, and when the Secretary General is not there, she is the Acting Secretary General of the party. We also have 3 of our female comrades in the political bureau of the party, and we have 55 women or 65 women in the Central Committee of the Socialist Party. And even at the lower levels, the secretary of the party branch in Lahj is a woman, and also in Fuwa and Hadramaut, the secretary. And yes, sometimes the local level is also very important to ensure representation, because this is where the real discussions take place, and this is where the daily engagement of society also occurs. Thank you all very much. I think this was an excellent question to end our discussion today. Also in Ta'az, we have comrades working in the female comrades working in the committee of the party. The youth federation in Ta'az was formed and 75% of the members were young women from Taiz. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Unfortunately, we have gone over time, and that was unexpected. We've gone around 20 minutes over the time that was planned. This was a very active and fruitful discussion. And we've seen that from the discussion that it seems to be that an agreement seems to be close, and it's also Saudi Arabia withdrawing from the war, but not necessarily an end to the conflict in Yemen, that the tensions might continue. And as was clear from this, it seems like the parties are trying to find or to explore their options in new alliances. We wish the best to these political parties. They're some of the only remaining civilian entities, and we hope that they can also work on assessing and rethinking their problems and mistakes, and not to blame others for the problems that or the mistakes that were committed. Thank you. I would like to thank the audience also for being here with us. I would like to thank our panelists. Have a good evening. Goodbye.